India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit Russia today. It's his first trip to Moscow since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has tested relations. Analysts say the visit suggests a continuation of Mr. Modi's push for India to be a global power, a bridge to the West, and a counterbalance to China. Neha Poonia has more.
For a decade, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been credited with elevating India's global presence, wooed by world leaders and cheered by the Indian diaspora on every visit.
भारत अब वैश्विक मंचों पर बोलता है तो पूरी दुनिया बड़े ध्यान से सुनती है। भारत फैसले लेता है तो दुनिया उसके साथ अपने कदम मिलाने की कोशिश करता है।
During Modi's last two tenures, India hosted the G20 presidency for the first time, began an outreach to countries in the global south, became more firmly aligned with the US and Western allies, but also maintained its historic ties with Russia, refusing to vote against Moscow at the UN over the war in Ukraine, while still buying deeply discounted Russian oil in the face of threats of Western sanctions. Analysts say this muscular foreign policy approach will likely continue in Modi's third term as well.
You know, the idea with Modi 3.0 is going to be continuity. You know, we've looked at what the first two administrations under Prime Minister Modi focused, which was basically trying to create a space for India where you're saying that you're aspiring for a leadership role, but that you're also bringing, you know, the strength of your economy, the strength of your diplomacy, your ability after G20 to show the world that you can be a bridging power between the West and the rest, if you will.
It's why India isn't shying away from engaging with Russia at the start of his new term. This is despite Washington expressing concerns about New Delhi's military and trade ties with Russia.
India has been careful to adopt a more neutral stance, not siding with the Western countries and cornering Russia, because at the end of the day, if Russia feels itself in a corner, the chances of a negotiated settlement become more remote. So we feel it's important not to have Russia pushed totally into the Chinese basket.
There's also speculation that Russia is trying to help India de-escalate tensions with China. Moscow has been pushing to revive a Russia-India-China trilateral dialogue, a precursor to BRICS, but that grouping has not met since 2020, when Indian and Chinese troops were involved in a deadly conflict in eastern Ladakh, sparking a border standoff that remains in place today. Tens of thousands of troops are now stationed permanently at that disputed site. Border differences between Beijing and New Delhi are not new. The two share a 3,400-kilometer-long frontier and have often disagreed over border demarcations, even fighting a war over differences in 1962. But after Modi came back to power last month, the appointment of a former Indian ambassador to China as the country's new foreign secretary is being seen as an indicator that New Delhi may be keen to reset bilateral ties. Recently, India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar also held a rare meeting with China's new envoy to India, where the two emphasized a common interest in stabilizing ties. Experts say this reflects India's geopolitical realities. Even as New Delhi pitches itself as an alternative to Western companies looking to move production lines away from China, India is still heavily import-dependent on Beijing, with bilateral trade hitting an all-time high of over $130 billion last year. And now, more and more Indian businesses are calling for visa relaxations for skilled Chinese workers after years of a public campaign calling for a full boycott of Chinese goods and services.
I think there is a realization that while we are not going to give up strategically at all, you have a military build-up which is, you know, going to be sustained. You are leveraging your partnerships with the US and other countries in the West to ensure that that strength is built upon. But there's also room for opening up of dialogue and to try and avoid miscalculation.
New Delhi is also contending with Beijing muscling in on its neighborhood. Last year, the Maldives became the latest country in the region to pivot towards Beijing after Nepal and Sri Lanka. It's why analysts say leaders from South Asian countries were invited to attend Modi's inauguration ceremony in June to send a message that India's neighborhood-first policy will remain a priority.
You cannot match the checkbook diplomacy, but what you can do is capacity build on the basis of non-reciprocity. And you can also build trust, whether it's Bangladesh, Maldives, Nepal. What India has really learned is to treat its neighborhood on parity.
Analysts say for now India's priority is also the West. They highlight Modi's attendance at the G7 summit in June and the possibility of fresh trade talks with the European Union and the UK. The US too has already begun engaging with Modi's administration, with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan traveling to New Delhi in June, soon after election results were out. President Joe Biden has called the US-India relationship the most defining partnership of this century. And in the past year, Washington has ramped up weapons sales and technology transfers to India, both to equip New Delhi to take on China militarily, but also to wean it away from its traditional supplier of military hardware, Russia.
हम तब तक नहीं रुकेंगे जब तक देश का डिफेंस सेक्टर आत्मनिर्भर नहीं बन जाता.
Experts warn that a possible return of Donald Trump to the White House in November might change that trade relationship. But with the West still keen on containing China, they will continue to woo India, which means it will be business as usual on the strategic front. Neha Poonia, CNA, New Delhi.